right, everybody. Hello. Hello, Internet. Hello, World Wide Web. Mike and Andy here, and from the Vox World Headquarters, Brea, California. We are so delighted you've tuned in to us. This is episode 50. So this has been a year. We took 2 weeks off around the holidays. We'll do that again. I like 50. I like 50 in a year, 50 episodes. That's solid.
Yeah, it's a solid number.
And so congratulations to us. They told us when we started we'd never last. They told us it would never work.
No matter how many churches and people have barred you, they said
no. So we have a lot of changes coming up to the organization of the podcast in honor of our 1 year anniversary. Before we get to those, however, just a brief comment on Andy's wardrobe today. He is sporting, a duck whistle. That's what that was, hopefully. Go ahead. Yep. That bright orange Mighty Ducks jersey and Mighty Ducks hat. And to which I, obviously Andy knew there would be some commentary when he comes strolling in with that. And he said, I'm wearing it because we won our first preseason game last night. So, signs you may have a problem. Signs you may have some sort of dysfunction in your relationship with a sport. Nothing says awesome like preseason hockey. Let me just say that. So Andy here is celebrating the Ducks' first win in preseason. And so congratulations.
Thank you.
It's hockey season.
Thank you.
And the nice thing is episode 50 coincides with Andy's 50th birthday.
Hey.
And so we're very excited about that.
Over the hill.
Go ahead, Andy. Why don't you fill us in a little bit on some of the changes that are coming?
Yep. Okay. So we are going to be releasing this episode on the 7th. I'm sorry. What's Monday? Today's Thursday.
Oh, boy.
Quick. Sorry.
Oh, my goodness.
Sorry.
Wow. It's a tight ship.
1, 2, 3. On the 10th.
On the 10th.
Okay, so we're going to be releasing this episode on the 10th.
Of October 2016.
That's right. So then what's going to happen is at the end of that week, on Friday of that week, I'm going to be officially forwarding subversivekingdom.com over to voxpodcast.com. So for those of you that have been using subversivekingdom.com to go to and listen to the episodes, you'll be able to listen to the episodes on voxpodcast.com. However, those episodes are available in a playlist that's presented through SoundCloud. So you'll be able to play it still on the site. But basically, the best two ways that you can be listening to the podcast here forward is either by subscribing to iTunes and listening to it that way, using a different... the best two ways, iTunes or directly on SoundCloud. So you can download the SoundCloud app and then follow the Vox Podcast. So that's soundcloud.com/the Vox Podcast. And you can actually subscribe there and follow there, and then you'll get updates when new episodes come out there. In addition, on the website, there's also a link to subscribe to
Which
the RSS
website?
On voxpodcast.com.
Is it live?
It is live.
Okay.
It's soft open. So
okay.
we'll be official grand opening on the 17th.
Sure.
Friday the 17th.
Wow.
Yep. So I'm going to roll everything over during that. During the week after, that's kind of like making sure everything doesn't fall apart. So if there's bugs and things that you guys have feedback about and want to email us, please do that after the 17th. So then the first episode of this next year season for us, episode 51, will actually come out on October 23rd. So there's about a whole week gap from this episode to then, or I'm sorry, a 2 week gap from this episode to then the next episode when we start. So for those of you that actually subscribe via RSS in the email on the Subversive Kingdom website, you'll get an email this week that kind of gives you all of this information. And then if you use like a separate app like Overcast or any of the other podcast catchers, there's actually a subscribe RSS link on voxpodcast.com that you can use that. But there isn't a blog on voxpodcast.com where you can subscribe to a blog on that site. So we're just using all app deployment to basically receive the audio in the podcast, but you could also play it off the site.
I think I understood perhaps 20% of what you just said there.
Good.
So the big deal is we're pulling subversivekingdom.com out.
Yes.
Right? It's done.
Right.
Those big old pictures of my face are going away. Thank you. And we're going to just
voxpodcast.com.
voxpodcast.com.
Right.
And the information will be there.
Yep, and then everything's there. And then we'll also be building ways for you guys to be able to contribute on an ongoing basis moving forward as well. So that may not be live instantaneously, but will be that's coming very shortly as well.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Contribute what?
If you'd like to give on a regular basis on monthly, like $5,
money.
$10, $10, as a way to support the Vox podcast and help us keep doing this.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. We need to upgrade some of our stuff. And I got a new chair that doesn't squeak. Yeah. So that's an expense. So, all right, that's excellent. If you have any questions, do we have it? Hello?
Yep.
At voxpodcast.com is where you want to hit us up at. Now, what we want to do, so you're saying we won't release an episode for a couple of weeks? Is that what you're saying?
That's right. So after this, there'll be a 2-week gap before the next episode comes out.
Well, what if I want to do one? What if I just want to do one by myself?
You can. It's just if we post it, it's just in the kind of transition time period.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, what would happen?
I mean, the world might blow up.
Yeah.
So apocalyptic.
The space-time continuum would...
Yeah.
So it may just get lost in the transition. Is that the word?
That might be, yeah. Because the big switch I have to make is change over what's called the RSS link in iTunes. And so if that for some reason kind of falls apart in switching it over,
right,
I'm going to need to be fixing it. And so if I'm trying to release an episode while fixing it at the same time, I just don't want it to get lost.
What if you didn't? What if I just did it? What if I just recorded one on my phone and just sent it? It said, take that.
Yeah, I could post it to SoundCloud, sure, if you wanted to.
There you go. See?
Yeah, it could be a preseason Vox podcast. Ooh. See, no one cares about preseason. You just made that comment.
That's very true. So, all right, so that is all good news, and Andy has been very hard at work, and we're very appreciative for that. The last thing is just the reminder that we have 2 podcasts right now, and potentially soon to be 3. This one is called The Vox Podcast, right, at voxpodcast.com.
Yep.
The other one is called The Vox Community Podcast, and that is the recording of stories and teachings from the weekend.
Right.
For our little community here in North Orange County.
Which you can get at voxoc.com, and you'll also be able to get that at voxpodcast.com as well.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay, so today we want to talk about forgiveness, because we've come across a couple of issues. We talked about spiritual abuse for several weeks, and then we've talked about the church for several weeks. And in each instance, I think people there's this thing that we hear in a shorthand kind of way that just is, well, I've been hurt by the church. I've been wounded by the church. And so whether that's in a spiritually abusive way, or it's just been the general, I didn't feel welcomed, I didn't feel accepted, felt judged. I mean, whatever that is. So we want to talk a bit about this. For Jesus, this was a pretty central deal. He obviously, when he taught us the prayer that he was praying, something called the Lord's Prayer, there's this line in there about forgive others as we ourselves have been forgiven. In Matthew's version of the Jesus story, there's a line there that talks about if you do not forgive people, your Father will not forgive you. Jesus tells a whole parable on forgiveness later on in the book of Matthew, where he contrasts somebody that's been forgiven an unrepayable debt, and then that person goes out and refuses to forgive somebody who owes him a much smaller debt, and the person who'd forgiven the incredible debt throws that debtor into prison, and Jesus ends with this warm fuzzy line, well, that's how it will be if you do not forgive people from your heart. So all of those raise very good questions about, okay, what's that exactly mean? The point, however, is that it's not optional for Jesus' people. And so I think there's a lot of confusion about what it is and what it isn't. And so we just want to spend some time talking a bit about forgiveness. So first of all, and this potentially is one of the more significant points of the whole conversation, forgiveness is a personal thing. You cannot forgive nameless and faceless institutions. When we say we've been hurt by the church, there could be a part of that we're hurt by the church culture, we're hurt by the church subculture, we're hurt by the way that Jesus following is expressed. But more often than not, what we're saying is we've been hurt by people in the church. Like there are names and faces attached. And it's really important to dig down to those names and those faces, because to kind of offer forgiveness the way that we're going to be talking about, you can't forgive. So if I have a bad experience with Wells Fargo, and I get angry at Wells Fargo, right? And I'm mad at the institution, and that's tough to kind of resolve, other than just saying, well, I'm not going to do business at Wells Fargo anymore, right? There's nothing there to really, like they screwed a whole bunch of people, and so, maybe you can get the name of somebody, but odds are in a faceless, nameless entity, we just kind of move on. We seek justice and we move on. We've been hurt by the church. We've been hurt by spiritual leaders who've been abusive. That we have to push past just the organizational entity and to see, and even if we don't know the names, odds are we'll remember the faces. And so there's a sense in which we have to turn this into something more personal than what we would do with Wells Fargo, as an example. We would turn this into, we've been hurt by people in the church, because forgiveness is ultimately personal. It's the reconciling, the resolving, the acknowledging of something that's happened between two personalities, two persons, not just an entity and another person. Make sense?
Yeah.
So there's a guy named RT Kendall who wrote a book called Total Forgiveness, and it's a bit out there in some of it, but it had this first section that I thought was really helpful, where it talked about what forgiveness is and what forgiveness is not. And so I'm adapting him for this list, but I thought it was super helpful. So and probably the most important thing is that we need to get rid of the whole forgive and forget line, because sometimes that's not true. That sometimes there's forgiveness, but to protect yourself, to keep yourself from getting hurt again, you don't forget. In fact, to authentically forgive, sometimes you need to remember precisely and exactly what has taken place. So forgiveness. So let's start with forgiveness. What it's not. All right. To forgive somebody doesn't mean that you approve of what they did, justify what they did, or excuse what they did. Right? That is so unbelievably important. We're not confusing forgiveness with tolerance. We're not confusing forgiveness with kind of very lukewarm sort of definitions of love. No. To forgive something means that you name the truth of it in all of its ugliness. So you're not approving, you're not justifying, you're not excusing. It also doesn't mean that we didn't take it seriously. Part of the healing process is to really explore all of the ways it did damage. You have to see the offense clearly. You have to explore all the pain that it's caused to actually offer this. Forgiveness isn't a Band-Aid. It's not a superficial solution. It's not just saying, okay, well, I'm sick of feeling this way, so I'm going to forgive. It's something much deeper than that, because it requires us to deeply examine. So forgiveness is not pretending that we're not hurt. That's a huge one. I think in Christian circles, sometimes there's this undercurrent of, well, Jesus people just shouldn't be hurt so often. And sometimes we're more easily offended than the average person, for sure. But there isn't the kind of forgiveness that God speaks of, isn't a forgiveness that pretends, and it's not a forgiveness that somehow glosses over, right? It's a forgiveness that sees very clearly what's going on. Forgiveness is not pardoning what they did or releasing them from consequences if those consequences need to happen. So whether they're legal consequences, forgiving somebody doesn't mean you don't protect yourself, that you don't move out, that you don't put boundaries on, that you don't contact the authorities. There's a difference between a sin and a crime. And sometimes something can be a sin and it's not a crime, right? Like pride. Sometimes something is both a sin and a crime. And in those instances, the legal consequences often need to take place. So forgiving them doesn't mean that you're removing those consequences. It could, but it doesn't automatically mean that. Forgiveness, to forgive somebody, does not mean that you're going to be reconciling with them. How do you forgive somebody who has died? So let's say your parents have died and you're waking up to all this stuff. How do you forgive somebody that's not around anymore? How do you forgive somebody who is unsafe for you? And so forgiveness doesn't automatically mean reconciliation. It doesn't matter, or excuse me, it doesn't mean that things are going to go back to the way that they were. So if a spouse cheats on another spouse and they choose to fight for their marriage, it's going to be a new normal. It's not just going to go backward, right? There's a new normal there that has to be explored. And so to forgive, for the one spouse to forgive the other, doesn't mean that there's just automatic, quick and fast reconciliation and trust built back up. That is a very long process. It doesn't mean that the relationship goes back to the way that it was. It doesn't mean that we close our eyes to people who continue to harm. If you've been the victim of abuse, that forgiveness doesn't mean that you stay there. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you continually subject yourself to that. So sometimes in the perfect world, forgiveness and reconciliation are two things that go together, right? So I'm forgiving in order to be reconciled. But because we're dealing with distance or time or space, or they're not safe, sometimes forgiving somebody doesn't mean that we've gone back to the way it used to be. It means something differently. Sometimes forgiveness means that we have to remember what they did, not to hold it against them, but to protect ourselves or our families or our loved ones. So forgiveness is not approving of what they did, excusing, justifying, refusing to take it seriously, pretending that we're not hurt, pardoning. Forgiveness does not necessarily mean we're reconciling with them, or we deny what they did, we're glossing it over. Like, all of this was super helpful because I think there was this forgive and forget thing. God forgets our sins. He removes them as far as the east is from the west. And so should we do that with other people? And in the best case scenarios, absolutely, right? I mean, Paul even says in 1 Corinthians 13, love keeps no record of wrongs. And so love wars against scorekeeping. And I think that's what we're aiming for, right? So when my wife and I get into an argument, which never happens, but suppose it did, one of the things that we've had to work on, hypothetically, is not going backwards into old arguments, not keeping the record of, remember the time that once we've resolved something, we try to move on from that. And so in the perfect world, that's what we're shooting for. But the world, as we all know, is far from perfect. So forgiveness isn't this kind of lukewarm Band-Aid. It has to be this deep exploration of what actually took place, right? Makes sense so far?
Yeah, I'm tracking.
You're okay.
Well, I so far I'm hanging on in thought the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. I'm hanging on to not forgiving entities, but that it has to look personal.
It's personal.
So those are. Yep.
Even if the person is just symbolic of the entity, to have a name and a face furthers the process in ways that entities, you got to get past the entity.
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, the thing that I'm thinking about with that is let's say, and you kind of said this, what if your parents, pass and you can't reconcile, but you can forgive,
Yep.
It's kind of does forgiveness, is forgiveness complete when you're kind of just verbally confirming it, or it's in your head, but you never come to that person and forgive them?
Well, sometimes it has to be.
Okay. Right.
But there can be very symbolic actions of writing a letter that you never mail, spending some time having a conversation, in your head that you're never able to have.
Right.
Those sorts of things.
Yeah, because we would probably say it goes into heart orientation, because it's a matter of confessing and putting this stuff out to be seen, so then you could kind of move forward, past it. But
that's exactly it.
Okay.
So what is forgiveness? Well, when sometimes Jesus will say, your sins have been forgiven, and the word there means that they've been sent away, they've been let be, they've been dismissed. Your sins have been dismissed. And so if we translate, because obviously Jesus is meaning it in ways that you and I can't, right? We have no authority so forgiveness, and one of the ways I've come to understand it is it's yielding my right to get even, yielding my right to, or my perceived right to punish or to return evil for evil. It is the for those of us that follow Jesus, it is the reenactment of what Jesus has done for us. Namely, that there's truth, that yes, the offenses did take place, they were serious, they're real, they're important, they matter. But it's the yielding of the right to exact revenge or vengeance or payment or whatever it is. Now that could be separate from crime stuff. But it's the yielding of my right to see that wrong corrected, because ultimately it takes two to reconcile, but it only takes one to forgive. So I may go to somebody who has no idea that they ever offended, that they ever hurt me. Right. And say, listen, I need you to know I deeply forgive you. And the other person's going, oh, okay, I don't even remember that scenario.
Yeah.
And I've had that happen on both directions, where I've been the offender and I've been the offendee.
Yeah.
And in that case, there wasn't two to reconcile. There was one person who was feeling the weight of this, who needed to yield their right to judgment, to vengeance, to whatever. Make sense?
Yeah, because I've thought about that very thing a lot. Okay, because I have a number of people in my life that I've lived in that, where I'm feeling like I need to forgive them, whether that's just kind of in my heart so I can move forward, but it feels like, okay, I'm supposed to articulate this to this person, but I'm like, how weird is that though, to go to someone who doesn't even realize the offense, and you're being like, hey, I'm forgiving you. To me, it almost sounds a bit pretentious, you know? And so I guess does it, now this is kind of a conversational thing, in order to bring that to light, I've found for myself, I'm in a couple places I have done this, where I've gone and said, hey, I need to ask for your forgiveness, because I've been holding this against you for such a long time, and I just need to let you know that's not good on me. That's
a great way to say that.
Okay,
that's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. I have scenarios in my head where I've had to go do that to people. This happened months ago, and I didn't realize it bothered me so much, but it bothered me so much, and I've judged you and I've held it against you, and it's I don't remember who said it, but forgiveness is setting someone free and finding out it was you.
Yeah.
Is kind of the idea. Because the other person doesn't have to feel that they've done anything.
Right.
So forgiveness, when you talk about it being sort of an inner condition, absolutely is that. Because sometimes the person doesn't want to reconcile. The person can't reconcile because they're not here, because they've died, because they're far away, or sometimes they didn't even know they offended. So they can say, so if you came to me, Andy, and said, listen, I'm tired of the whole ducks thing, man. I'm so hurt by that. I'm resentful. And I could say, oh, okay, I had no idea you were upset by that. I'm absolutely sorry. Right. That my apology isn't based on, man, I can see I've deeply hurt you.
Right.
My apology is based on the fact that you're bringing something to me that you need to release.
Yeah.
And that I'm sorry I contributed to that, even unknowingly. So there's a sense in which we do have to pull apart forgiveness and reconciliation in some of these examples. Again, the goal always is reconciliation, always. Mm-hmm. But realistically, that just doesn't always happen. And so sometimes forgiveness has to be offered in the heart, and that's the only place it goes. Mm-hmm. It's the person that's behind bars who did something, to a family member that you can't, you can't see them. How do you forgive them? It's all of the distance time scenarios, that we've been wrestling with. So forgiveness, it's one of these, it's so hard because you can what if it to death. But a quick punch list of like what forgiveness is. It's based on what God's done for us. If you're a Jesus follower, the idea is whatever you've received, you pass on. So Paul will say something like, comfort others with the comfort you've received. Forgive others because you've been forgiven, right? Show grace because you've been shown grace. Show mercy, you've been shown mercy. So part of the ethic of the New Testament is whatever God has done for you, you are to now extend it because you owed an unrepayable debt. Other people owe you a very repayable debt. So who are you to be the judge and arbiter? Now, and that works for a lot of offense, but there are these deep ones, the abuse that happened or the betrayal, and it's just not enough to say, well, okay, so God did it for me, so I have to do it, right? It's more complicated than that. And so forgiveness is feeling the weight of the whole thing. It's digging it back up to feel the full brunt of all that happened and all that was felt. And that doesn't mean we're being re-victimized. That means that in an attempt to not gloss this over in the way that we express it, either to the person or just even internally in us, we name it. We name it for what it is. For the sin it was, for the crime it was, for the injustice it was, for the abuse it was, we name it. And that is so absolutely important. Forgiveness is being aware of what someone else has done, feeling the full weight of it. It's ultimately a process that leads to a choice and a continued choosing of I'm yielding my right to get back at this person. I'm yielding my right to punish them, to show them, to that inner sort of fuel when we are kind of nursing grudges. It's a beautiful thing, man. Anger is so cleansing and focusing, and it's yielding kind of our perceived right to that. Forgiveness is refusing to punish. It's the again, that's separate from consequence, but it's the when my wife does something that deeply hurts, it's the yielding of my desire to punish in return or to get back. Ultimately, it's an inner condition. And one of the things that Kendall brings up in his book that is so obviously true is that sometimes, and we say this with fear and trembling, but sometimes we feel like we have to forgive God. We feel like, well, where was God during that abuse? Where was God during that rape? Where was God when this beating was happening? Where was God? And there's a resentment that here God says he's all good and God can control anything and God's all powerful. And yet here's this incredible, ugly thing that's happened to me. And so how do you forgive God? And even though, it sounds so crazy to put ourselves in the moral seat, over what God should or should not have done. He explores a little bit of, well, what's that mean? And what's that look like? And what it would mean to yield my right to sit in judgment of God or to yield my right. Ultimately, forgiveness is trusting that justice will be done. Even if you're not the agent of that justice.
Right. For me, like, if I think about forgiving God, part of it is that I feel like I'd be returning integrity. Like I'm returning claim, like to another person. Because if I'm sitting in a seat where I believe something is owed to me, then I'm sitting in a place of entitlement and deserving, and in that, where then at that point, I feel like the view you put on another person is you've taken away credit, you've taken away integrity because of like, I can't validate your stance and the why you did it. It lacks acknowledgement. So to me, it's like I don't feel a moral conflict in the idea of both like blessing God and or forgiving him, because it's kind of this really interesting heart introspective, because it's kind of like I need to return back to God the integrity that I know that he is, that in my heart and sight, I'm refusing to see that in my anger, or I'm refusing to see that in like feeling he owes me something because of something that's been taken away.
Yes.
Because it suggests he is less than what I believe he is. And so to me, to forgive, it's like to return integrity and return back to.
I like that.
And that's kind of.
And I really like that, because that's the difference between our theology and what we really think about what God's like. Yeah. Right? Your theology can be God is good all the time. God is good.
Yeah.
And yet you carry around this sense of abandonment and betrayal.
Yeah.
When God wasn't there, when you needed Him. Mm-hmm. And so it's acknowledging that I like that. It's returning honor. It's forsaking my entitlement in some way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. That's good. Kendall also talks about forgiving yourself. That I've heard people say that I know God forgives me, I just don't know that I can forgive myself, and which is an interesting.
Yeah.
I don't struggle with that one. I give myself loads of grace, but I've talked to folks who feel this way.
Yeah.
I don't know how to forgive myself. What's that look like, and what's that mean? Mm-hmm. So in all of these, whether it's another person, whether it's ourselves, whether it's the symbolic head of an institution, whether it's a parent that's no longer here, whether it's we feel abandoned, betrayed by God, how do we? What's the process? And obviously, there's no step-by-step sort of formula, but there are some like sign markers kind of along the way, and there is so this is my journey in having to learn how to do this, both as someone who has hurt others, and as somebody who's been hurt by others. Sometimes, so to say forgiveness is a process means that we're looking that the bar for growth is really low. And so what that means is perhaps forgiveness begins when we can say their name. You know how when parents get divorced, they don't refer to each other by their name anymore to the kids. It's always like your mom,
your mother, or your dad.
Your dad. Yeah. You kind of become nameless.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's being able to say their name. Maybe it's just simply, maybe growth today is not wanting lightning to strike them, randomly or some sort of, random accident. Maybe growth today is the step towards forgiveness today is just being able to look at their picture without spitting at it, or I mean, it's a low bar, right?
Yeah.
So this isn't something that you just do. This is something that you continue to do. This is something that you work into, and that has to grow from a very low place of I wish them harm. I wish I could give them a piece of my mind. I want everyone to know what they did, right? I mean, just that deep, I've got to do something with all of this pain. It's not fair that I'm suffering and they're not. It's not fair. They get to go and have just a fine day, and then here I am. I'm reeling the entire day. It's not fair.
Right.
And so what were you going to say?
I was going to say it's such value is such a human struggle. Like when someone harms you, it feels like they've taken value from you and you didn't give it away. It was taken from you. Correct. So you so badly want it back, and it's you go through that whole range of, emotion to figure out what does it take to get that value back. Well, the first thing you think of is to offend the person that's offended you. It's just that's such that the initial thing is that core of revenge, and that's when you start there and then you end up with the picture of God, that's when things get so fascinating, because anyways, I'm not going, I don't have anywhere to go with that. What you just said though, is it, when we talk about naming something as a way to forgive it, is this, mm-hmm. We see Jesus do this, right? In so many conversations in which he forgives sin, very often he exposes it so it can be seen what's forgiven. We see that in the, but some of it's healings where it's physical, and it's almost treat it as because like we've told the story about lowering down the paralyzed man,
right?
And that was like such the balance of healing and forgiveness,
right?
Like what's harder to,
because they saw behind the physical the deformity or the physical handicap or the physical disability or even sickness, behind that it was a sin issue,
right?
So for them to be forgiven and to be healed are very, very close together,
right?
So yes, Jesus isn't into pretending. Somehow we've turned him into that, right? We've turned him into the great pretender.
How so?
We've made the whole thing about making sure you believe the correct doctrines, and as long as you believe the correct doctrines, you can kind of do whatever you want.
Okay.
And Jesus just doesn't play that. He doesn't play that game like, well, Jesus, my righteousness has been imputed to you, and your righteousness has been imputed to me, and so when you look at me, you don't see my sin. And there is a theological way that that's true. Absolutely, our sin is no longer held against him, but it's not like Jesus up there pretending that I'm still not sinning.
Yeah.
Turning a blind eye, going, "Oh, I had no idea you were still into that." I mean, it's more muddy, I think, than that. So how do you forgive? Step one, if there's any step, it is set the bar so low that you're on the right path when you begin to see the insanity of revenge. Because you begin to see how revenge always escalates and amplifies. It always gets worse, and it always gets more. Like it never satisfies. Although we love it, we thirst for it. And so many of our movies and our art, literature, music is based on getting back, showing them they passed me over in the draft, and I'm going to show them, that person rejected me, and now look at me. I mean, it's just this, like, oh, we love these revenge sort of fantasy movies.
Oh, they're the number one films. Is violence, is justice violence.
Yes,
it's unreal. Like, yes. I mean, you look at Marvel, Avengers, which all movies I love, but it's all surrounded around violent acts in order to achieve justice. Yeah. I mean, it is.
Yeah, some theologians call it the myth of redemptive violence, that somehow righteous violence can counteract unrighteous violence. And Jesus, oh my goodness, Jesus forsakes the whole violence game. I mean, that could be a whole, like the whole violent, nonviolent conversation could be a whole podcast. Oh my goodness. But step one is moving from I really want them to be hurt to okay,
that won't fix it.
That won't fix it. Step two is the realization that there's something that has to go on between God and me, and not just me and the person. So there's some sort of darkness. There's something that's gotten in to my soul. An old Bible phrase is a root of bitterness, which is such a compelling image because that's exactly what it is. It just starts out as this little bitty seed, and it gets nursed in the dark, and it grows, and it begins to take over, and it becomes so familiar for some of us we don't even realize it's there. We don't have any idea how much we are living in reaction to something that happened years and years and years ago, and so we begin to realize that forgiveness isn't just a relational issue with the other person, it's a spiritual issue. Like there's something going on in me that God needs to be brought in on, and I need to find healing from, and I need to process with, you know what I'm saying? And that, of course, again, doesn't separate the legal consequences, the restraining order, the whatever it is you've got to do. And then this one I've actually, so I know what both of those feel like. This one is the one that I've seen begin to practice and work in ways that, like, this one is kind of the most practical for me, to begin to picture the person in my head and to name them and pray God's goodness over them and God's blessing over them. So Jesus says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Bless those, right, who persecute you. And so there's this, okay, and I've done it where I don't mean it. Like, I'm literally just saying a sentence of words. God bless so-and-so today. Done. right? I don't mean it. I don't want it. I'm still back on step one, because ultimately forgiveness has to be offered, even if they don't get caught or found out, even if they'll never fully know and appreciate what they did, even if they prosper, and it turns out they have a better life without you than they did with you, even if they're sorry or not sorry, we still, forgiveness is still something we're offering, regardless of all that other stuff on their end.
Yeah.
Right. Forgiveness is my-sided. It's not their sided too.
Right. Right.
So I'm offering it even if they don't know
Sure.
how much it hurt.
Right.
So to begin to pray words, God bless this person, bless this community, bless these individuals and these leaders, is the absolute hardest thing. And then what begins to happen, and this is over the course of months or years, over that time, I've seen my heart move from I want to punish, I want revenge, I want to get back at them, I want to expose them for the fraud they are, the hypocrite they are, whatever it is. My heart moves from that to neutral, which is I can be in the same room, I can hear their name, I can say their name, and there isn't a big eruption of emotion, right? Now, I still don't mean the blessing part, right? What I really want God to do is to show me exactly what his justice against them is going to look like. At which point God begins to say, well, there are lots of people that feel that way about you. And so it's interesting, Mike. This is what God will say. You're a big fan of justice when it comes to others, but mercy when it comes to yourself. So let's start there. So I've moved into neutral, and God then begins to show me where I was wrong, where I messed up, where I contributed to the mess. Now, again, I'm not talking about extreme situations of abuse. I'm not talking about those extremes. I'm talking about the common, ordinary kind of the meat and potatoes of conflict and disappointment in life. Right. The extreme stuff, I hope we've given enough disclaimers that if you're sitting there hearing this, man, some of this requires therapy and dedicated prayer and, very clear and deliberate exercises of spirit and will and, interpersonal relationships. Holy cow. But a lot of just the ordinary resentment we carry around isn't of that variety. And so where do you go? So for me, praying the blessing, taking Jesus literally to say, okay, I'm going to bless those who I feel like have persecuted me, that moves me to neutral. And again, all I'm looking for just what's growth. And sometimes time is just what it takes. Sometimes I have to forgive or be forgiven in a quick way, like I'm being confronted with something right away, and we have to resolve that. Often marriage is like that, right? Where you could stay angry for years, but you don't want to do that.
Yeah. Okay, can I jump in on something?
Yeah.
So I'm so I'm struggling with blessing.
Okay. Yes.
And here's why.
Right.
So there's fantastic thought-based psychology, and I think there's even consistency in prayer theology with this of word repetition that helps shape the heart. That helps us to kind of use the ideas to kind of take us into orientation to become the kind of person that can move towards somebody positively and lovingly. I feel like the danger in over validating, like, just pray to bless somebody, it all still seems very self-oriented, because doing that really serves you, because if that person never knows, and they never are able to receive blessing other than divine coincidence in which God does bless them through your prayers, but like there's no like triangulation or affirmation of like, whoa, that was from God because someone else was asking that would be provided.
Yeah.
It seems like, I guess what I'm going to ask is, what do we have in Scripture that takes us beyond kind of the prayer process of blessing into I'm going to physically bless this person. Like I'm going to go and act in blessing to show my love as an act of forgiveness, as an act of moving into that. Like,
well, that's what praying is.
Yeah.
No. I mean, don't dismiss that too quick.
Okay.
My praying blessing for someone is a physical act of blessing.
Okay.
Someone, and so I don't want to set up a false dichotomy there to say no. Because sometimes that's all I can do if the person's no longer around or whatever. I can't physically go do something.
Right.
I think if I just had someone sit down with me and express some anger and some disappointment at something I'd done, and I had no idea that I was causing hurt and offense. I had no clue. And so the final step was the physical act of blessing was actually coming and naming the offense and saying, I forgive you for this, even though I didn't have the full measure of what it took to get to that place. Like the physical act of sitting down, looking somebody in the eye and saying, I forgive you, I bless you. Oh my goodness. I mean, that's right. I mean, now we're on the road to reconciliation.
Yes. Yeah. Because to me, that validates what I'm saying. Like that's like physical one-to-one sitting in front of a person. You're saying like, this is my heart. I'm forgiving you. And I want to bless you and and see blessing upon your life.
Yes.
So it's like, there's a connection and like, there's a receiving of in that kind of thing.
That's right.
I guess, so I can understand the dualism in that sitting and physically blessing that person through prayer, you know, as God would provide for them. I could validate that.
But remember, blessing's more than provide.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
It's what you're calling down upon somebody is God's favor.
Okay.
And so it's a much deeper than physically. I mean, it's like God show them favor.
Yeah.
That's what you're asking. Cursing, of course, is God show them disfavor. And that's where we all start. And so yes, you're saying the words to guide your heart. And it's an act of the will before it becomes an act of the affection or the emotion. It's just simply an act of the will. God bless this person. And that's all I say. And or you drive by the place and you say, okay, God, bless this place.
Yeah.
You drive by the spiritual community, or you hear the name of the spiritual abusive and you just say, God, bless that person.
Yeah.
And you may never be able to or have opportunity to physically reenact that, or you may. Regardless, what that's doing to your heart, at least what it's done to mine, is it softens it to the point where I get back to neutral, where I'm not wishing harm anymore. I'm not wishing to get back at somebody anymore, right?
Yeah.
And then if those opportunities arise where now I can demonstrate blessing, either by a conversation, by a phone call, by a sit down, by I can physically give them a gift. All of those sorts of things, fantastic. But that's just the fruit of the work that's already been done. The work that's already been done is getting to the place where you've yielded your right or your perceived right to get back at them. And you dismiss the offense. You're now, again, that doesn't mean you've forgotten about it. It doesn't mean you're not careful. I mean, all the disclaimers, but it means you've gotten to the place where you can say their name. You can be in the same room. You can interact perhaps with them, and there's no surge of anger, disappointment, pain. That it's neutral. You've gotten back to neutral.
Right.
So blessing doesn't mean that you're doing the blessing always. It means that you have yielded your seat of judgment to the one true righteous judge. Right? I mean, that's kind of the Christian-y way to say it.
Yeah.
And you do that in recognition of, and this is what neutral looks like, in the recognition of the fact that I'm the biggest sinner in the room. And so for me, healing looks like seeing my sin is bigger than their sin. And that's when I know I'm whole again, is when I don't look at them as someone who deserves worse or needs worse or whatever. I've still got my junk front and center. Because when I'm in that place, I can bless anybody.
Yeah.
Right? When I'm in that place and aware of my own darkness that I'm more familiar with than anyone else's darkness, when I'm in that place, I'm in a good spot. When someone hurts me, the focus, my sole attention is like the eye of Sauron, goes zooming in, right, to their evil and to their hurt. And I'm not saying that's not legit. I'm not saying their evil isn't evil. No, it is. I mean, that's the basis of the whole forgiveness conversation, is you're naming it as evil, as injustice, as abuse, as you were a predator, you were a stalker, you were an abandoner, you were a betrayer, you were a liar, you were adulterer. I mean, you're naming it. You're naming it. You have to name it. And even in the naming of it, then, to name it and to feel the full weight of it, and then to yield your right. That's what it begins to look like. And I've only and for a lot of us, it's therapy that helps us to get there. It's loads and loads of processing in a community that gets us there. It's people starting out by saying, "Oh my goodness, I feel the same way. I'm so sorry. Me too." Sometimes it's just letting time go by, right? Time heals all wounds, is the old saying, and that's true and false. Yeah. And certainly, time does soften us, but we all know of things that we could go back to in an instant and feel again.
Right. Well, and I think to your point, like it's the reminder of pain that you've forgiven always seems like a conscious calling to the continuation of grace, because that just becomes another opportunity to transition to blessing, to transition to grace out of like the remembrance that you've forgiven the offense. Yeah. As it returns to you, like I've forgiven it. So how do I, kind of like I need to keep moving in action of the response to forgiveness.
Yes. And there's a freedom. So people will say, and I've experienced, when you actually genuinely forgive someone, when it actually happens, like not the words necessarily, but the deep releasing, there's a weight that lifts off. There's a, when there, you hear of somebody getting murdered, and then the parents of the murdered person come into a courtroom and they forgive. Yeah. When the Amish community years ago, there was the shooter that rampaged through a school, and the Amish community just as one and immediately forgave this person and their family. I mean, there's a weight that goes off. There's a freedom at no longer nursing grudges. And so God in His genius, He even uses our self-interest, to motivate us towards this. Because it's a just dark prison to live in that. And then you realize, I was the only one suffering. It's not like the other person was feeling horrible about this. I was the only one suffering. Yeah. So, there aren't. This is an episode I talk about with great fear and trembling, because, as we hear bits and pieces of your stories, we know that this is an area where the church has furthered the abuse. So you've been victimized once, and then you get slapped with, you just need to forgive, or it wasn't that bad, or the Christian answer is to just not, go back and talk about it or whatever. And so you get re-victimized because of the church's response to your pain. And so we don't want to be glib in any of that. But there is wisdom here, but there's gospel here. Like this is Jesus stuff. This is one of the defining marks of His kingdom, His love of enemy. And to get to that, to not just be neutral, but to love enemy. Oh my goodness. Right. That's like PhD level Jesus stuff. And yet, that's the defining mark of His kids. Yeah. So, lots to work on, sweet Andy Bear. So, we'll clock it at this. We'll stop it here. If this raises further questions, or you want to share your story, obviously we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What did we miss? What's your experience been? What have been things that you've done that you'd want some of our listeners to know that have been helpful to you on the journey? Any of that stuff, man, we'd love it. So you can go to hello@voxpodcast.com. You can go to Mike at at voxoc.com. You can go to Facebook Sketchy, guys. I'm not gonna lie.
Wait, what?
I get a lot of random stuff, so I very rarely ever check that. So email's by far the best way to do it. But would love your thoughts on this very delicate of subjects. So, Andy, anything you want to add?
I don't have anything to add.
Beautiful. And for that, we're thankful. I forgive you for the clown.
I forgive you for that.
I forgive you for the clown manatee.
Oh.
Anyway, my brothers and my sisters, we hear of people listening around the world. We hear of missionaries listening in Europe. We hear of naval soldiers, I guess, in the Far East. We hear of small groups of gatherings down under in Australia. It's absolutely remarkable. So I just, again, we are, and I know I say it every time, but I deeply, deeply mean it. We're unbelievably privileged that you allow us entrance into your life, into your world. And we take that very, very seriously. And we're honestly thrilled that a year has gone by, and you've allowed us to keep doing this, and you've given us such great feedback in doing it. And so we're stoked on year 2. We're going to start the year with. Can I announce it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just couldn't tell. Your face was like.
No, sure. I was thinking of the date, so no. But yeah. Go ahead.
Well, you're the fandy of this guy.
Okay, got it. Okay, yeah. So, episode 51, we'll have Joey Svensson on from the Bad Christian podcast, and also the Pastor with No Answers podcast. So We're excited about that.
Two of the most listened to podcasts that are out there, and so he's got some thoughts on mental illness and growing up in a deeply, deeply fundamentalist culture. And so that'll be fun. We'll start off there. We've got some other guests lined up. We're trying to get Jesus of Nazareth on the show. He keeps saying he's going to be back, but his dad doesn't know when. Or no, his dad's the only one that knows when.
If you're a close friend, if you could put a word in, something or other.
Yes, we'd love to have him. Well, what we could do? We could get the guy from the Jesus Show on KFI.
Yes, can we?
Yeah,
can we?
That would be awesome.
Oh my gosh!
If Jesus doesn't sound like that, right when we meet him, I'm going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
Because it's like if Moses doesn't look like Charlton Heston, I'm just going to be so bummed. Anyway,
no one comes after Moses enough and critiques how we've visualized him as well. That's a really good point.
Yeah. These are all Palestinian folks. These are not whiteys. So. Excuse me. Anyway, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance to you right where you are right now, and may he give you peace in these days. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Vox, the Mike Geary podcast. Be sure to like Mike on Facebook at facebook.com/official Mike Geary. Follow Mike on Twitter and Periscope at Mike Geary for live interaction and ongoing Q&A. Don't forget to visit subversivekingdom.com for further engagement and information about Mike.